minutes? If not, all in favor of approving the minutes? And again, we've got to do it by roll call. Anita,
Aye.
Lorna,
Aye.
Jenny,
Aye.
Lou,
Aye.
Megan,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Tanner.
Aye.
Okay, and I vote aye as well. Okay, I'm just going to segue back to Damien here. Damien, were you able to address that concern, or Dean, do you know?
Yes, it just came on.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
yeah.
It's also been closed captioned, so even though we couldn't hear it, people could follow along.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you.
Item 5.0, adjustments to the agenda. I have a couple. There is under committee reports, a finance committee report, which I'd like to make item 8.4.
Okay.
And under new business, item 12.5, I'd like discussion of an ad hoc committee to review our remote learning experience. Pat, do you have anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay, thanks. Okay, item 6.0 is the public session, and I think everyone should have received two. We did get two comments, comments from a couple of individuals. So, did everyone receive two comments? Patrick sent them out, I think. Yeah. So we have a comment from Aaron Taylor, who addresses the board. I'm just going to paraphrase these. I just want them reflected in the record, and obviously to those people who are on the live stream who haven't seen them. So Aaron's comment concerns an inquiry whether the board is planning to is going to convene a planning committee with the administration and school nursing staff specifically to look at issues, to consider issues related to the safe opening of the schools. So concern related to boarding the buses and entry to the school for walkers, what our policy is on masks and temperature checks prior to school entry, looking at alternatives to in terms of learning, in terms of physical education, bathroom cleaning, contact tracing of any students who identify as having been infected with the COVID virus. And obviously our policy related to school activities and sports, and is interested in knowing how and when we would address those issues. The second comment is a letter which we received from Karen De Silva, Bethany Wallace, and Stephen McKay, and it's kind of a parallel issue in some ways. Again, asking the board to set up a committee that will look at both the district's response to the present situation, primarily remote learning, and asks that the committee be broadly inclusive of administration, information technology specialists, teachers, union representation, and involve parents as well. I think in both, and we'll discuss this. We have an opportunity to revisit this, the proposal or the recommendation that we set up a committee under new business. But I think in both cases, and I think Patrick and Katie will address this under their reports. I mean, there is a plan to do a survey going forward, and to try to ascertain what our experience has been and where the problems have come with the remote learning as we know it. I think part of the longer letter from Karen, Bethany, and Stephen also looks at this prospectively. What can we learn from this experience, and how can we develop that into a plan that might be used to address or to respond to future school closings along this line. I think there are two issues here. One is the postmortem that we'll definitely do, looking at what our experience has been, what we've learned, what our shortcomings have been in the current, in the way that we're currently addressing remote learning. And the second aspect is the prospective one. In other words, what can we do going forward? How can we use this experience as an opportunity to build resources within the district to address any closings that might happen in the future? I don't think anyone ever anticipated this, for sure. I think the approach that we've taken up to this point, at least as the way I've understood it to this point, is one of continuous feedback and continuous improvement. I mean, Katie and Patrick are constantly talking to the administrators and teachers and using the feedback that we get. And we've heard from parents, and they've heard from parents in terms of issues as they've arisen. And I think there is that continuous loop that is being used to address our current continuous learning plan, the plan which is what we voted on last week. So there is an evaluation in place. I mean, not a formal evaluation. I agree there is a need to formally evaluate and to develop a detailed survey to get out to parents and teachers and those who have been affected by this remote learning experience. And I would include students there as well, by the way. So it's not as if we've been flying blind on this, but at some point there will be an opportunity to formalize it. I think personally we're still very much in the middle of it. It's a question of how much do you want to pull Patrick back and Katie back and the teachers back, to start from doing meeting their daily responsibilities, to start to do this evaluation. So timing might be an issue, but we can discuss that as we deal with item 12.5. Right. Yep. 12.5. So those are the two comments. I think that they will be when the record of the meeting, when the minutes of the meeting are posted. I presume that these will be attached to the minutes of the meeting, so that everyone in the community will have a chance to read those comments in more detail. All right, that kind of I didn't say it, but that kind of covered 6.0, I think, in terms of public session. 7.0 staff report. Patrick?
No, there's nothing there under staff
Okay.
report. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, 8.0 then, 8.1, legislative update. Lorna?
Sure. So we've all been watching the news, and I'll just kind of go over the key highlights. The legislative session for Maine ended on March 17th. And I'll get to a few critical things in that session. But the federal government announced on April 23rd that the release of $13.5 billion in funding for K through 12 relief. Maine is targeted to receive about $43 million. The state, the DOE has until July 1 to apply for those funds, with applications supposedly being reviewed within 3 days of receipt. The funds will be passed on to the states and then to the districts via what I understand to be through the Title I formula. So I think in summary, our decision to extend the second reading of the budget was wise to afford some time to see how that all fleshes out and how it's allocated and how it trickles down to us. From reading the language of the Emergency Act, we can use those funds for many of the supports that Steve had actually talked about in our Finance Committee meeting when we get to that. As for Maine, LD 2167 was kind of our emergency legislation. Most of us know by now that afforded us many waivers and extensions, which included the continuation of food service. I would report that this is, it also was a means through which compulsory school days and assessments were waived, budget timelines were allowed to be extended, and authorization for these remote meetings were granted. Two key bills that I'll just mention just really quickly that came out of the Maine legislature was LD 1918. This broadens the use of reserve funds from capital-related improvements to instruction and support. 1855, LD 1855, changes the definition of excusable absences to personal health, including the person's mental and behavioral health. And then there was a number of bills that died or that were pushed off. But one bill, LD 2106, an act regarding school discipline for Maine's youngest students, this would have prohibited schools from prescribing any kind of suspension, expulsion, or withholding of recess as a consequence of violation of school code of conduct for grades 5 and below. The Education Committee unanimously voted against that bill, so right now that stands in local control. There's obviously a lot more bills that were put off or advanced for next session, but we can probably tackle some of those later in other meetings as they become more relevant.
Okay. Thank you, Lorna. Any questions? Any questions of Lorna? Okay. I do want to say one thing I forgot to say at the beginning of the meeting. I just want to make sure folks know that the meeting will be recorded and will be available on our website later in the week for individuals unable to see the live stream. So I should have mentioned that at the onset. Item 8.2, Morris Building Project Update. Patrick?
Yeah, still making good progress. We are going to pour the deck on the bridge tomorrow. So the concrete will be poured. Weather's not supposed to be great, but Crooker's still confident that we'll get it done tomorrow. Continue to frame out classrooms, and they are working from the 3rd floor down to the 1st floor. So there's a lot of sheetrocking happening on the 3rd floor. And we actually have started painting interior walls, which is kind of exciting. Metal siding is being installed. You can see it as you drive down Congress Street from the middle school, but the exterior of the auditorium, you can see that metal siding that's going up quickly. Elevator has been installed, as well as all the stairs in the building at this point right now. So in the gym, the stairs that go up to the fitness room are now in, and the stairs in the auditorium are in. And just lastly, the building committee meets this Thursday at 10 for a remote meeting, and really to talk about schedule and progress. But also the committee will be discussing such items as the canopy on the front of the school, the front sign that's down by Congress Street, some additional landscaping, and outside scoreboard on the turf field. So these are items that would be funded through our local reserve part of the budget, and items that we'd like to get feedback from the building committee on Thursday. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Patrick. Any questions of Patrick on that? I mean, it's amazing we have that project moving forward, at least for now, knock on wood, on schedule, with everything else that's going on. One question that we had talked about, Patrick, and I guess maybe we should leave it for the building committee meeting when Ron is here, but are there any concerns or issues that he's identified in terms of finding furniture and you know, getting technology and lined up and in place? Or,
No,
too soon to tell on that.
it might be a little soon because we're just in the process of creating a rough draft of all of our furniture needs. But he did reach out to the company, one of the biggest companies, and they felt at right now they're about a week behind where they normally would be. So, and same with technology. So as of right now, I don't see a delay.
Okay. Thanks, Patrick. Any questions of Patrick? No? Okay. 8.3, update on continuous learning plan. I guess this is Patrick and Katie.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So as we've obviously decided that our distance learning will be taking place from now through the end of the year, we did send updated communication home to families and to teachers as well. Today and tomorrow, and then also for the high school on Wednesday, teachers are able to come in wearing masks, gloves, using hand sanitizer. All of those protocols are in place in order to make sure that we have the paper packets for those who don't have internet that can be sent home. So that work is happening. We didn't really make adjustments to how we were doing the distance learning. So the number of hours, the type of work is still carrying on as it was previously. And just to remind everybody that was about 1 to 2 hours daily for K-8 with habits of work grades, and about 2 to 3 hours daily, depending on what courses students are in for the high school level. In terms of family pickup for those new packets and other items, we will be having a pickup day this Friday, May 1st. And we also sort of started collecting a little bit of data on our participation rates. So I'd like to just quickly share those averages with you. In terms of contact with families, just here, being able to reach out to everybody who's an RSU1 student across the schools, some better than others, but we average about 85 to 90% contact with families, and principals have been doing an excellent job along with our counselors and social workers of keeping lists and really trying to make sure that we are doing everything we can to reach everybody, even if they're not engaging in the distance learning. In terms of who is engaging in the distance learning, we're averaging about 70 to 80%. Some schools higher, some schools a little bit lower. For instance, BRCTC obviously is going to be a little bit lower because it's a very physical learning, and it's just really different when your teachers are posting videos, and so there's likely to be less engagement in that. And also many of those students are trying to do the work from their own schools because they're not all RSU1 more students, as you know. And so those are our rough numbers. We are looking forward, as Steve was talking about, on getting feedback soon as this continues, and starting to think about how long will it be continuing, and what the plan would look like. What shifts should we think about in terms of what's working for our teachers, what's working for our administrators, what's working for our families, and how can we get better at doing something that's just really new for all of us. And there's one other thing I was going to say, but it's gone. I don't remember what it was. So any questions?
Any questions of Katie?
I just have a question. For the families and children that you're finding that aren't able to engage, is there a common theme there that you're seeing, or anything that we should be addressing, trying to help with?
I don't know if there's a principal who wants to jump in here. I'm not, you actually, Anita, thank you, just reminded me of the other thing I wanted to say, which is, it really varies. It could be a lack of phone. It could be a lack of interest. It could be, someone who's homeless, who's not living in the same location as we last knew. So we have no way of getting in touch with them. And that's actually something that I spoke with Jamie Dorr and Donna Verhoeven about today. I don't know if any of you saw in the DOE press that there are mini grants, COVID-19 grants that the DOE is handing out for $5,000. And so this week, I'm going to write one on behalf of Jamie and Donna, because it actually needs to be written by the school. But our idea would be for Donna to be able to do the work that she does, reaching out to those students that are harder to reach, that 5 to 10% in all of our buildings across the district, to be able to drive to their homes, potentially bring them groceries or other hygiene products that we normally would be giving students, and have that be sort of our last ditch effort. So we really feel like we've done everything we possibly can. So hopefully with a little bit more money for supplies, for her mileage and whatnot, that's sort of another layer that we're hoping to put in place. That's due next Wednesday. And I went back and looked at the paperwork, and I couldn't find the turnaround time on when we'd actually be getting the money, but hopefully, they're very eager to do more as well. So it was a good conversation today, and I'm excited that we're working with them in this capacity as well.
I have a question, Katie.
Sure.
So in the 70 to 80% participation, and recognizing that our vocational and career school, it could be a little lower, can you at least, can you tell us whether it's Morse that tends to have the larger participation versus our elementary schools, or how our middle schools are faring in relation to the numbers that you gave us?
Yeah, honestly, it really all depends. I was trying to, there was a reporter who reached out to Patrick and myself for these numbers, and I was trying to put together some trends even for him. But, and these are, again, our guesses, because we're not taking formal attendance, but our best guesses are, BRCTC is around 60. I'm just looking at my data right now. BMS varies between 75 in grades 7 and 8. In 6th grade, it's a little bit lower. At Woolwich, 75 to 80. Phippsburg, younger grades, is higher, 90 in some places. Fisher Mitchell is 85 and 75 to 85. So it really varies, but it's good that we're getting, I would say in general, I feel pretty positive saying that 3/4 of our students, I think if you were to give a general statement, are tending to participate as far as we can tell. And that doesn't mean every single day. They might just pop in for one Zoom meeting, but not be doing all the work because they can't manage that. But we're at least seeing that amount of activity. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just jump in, Lauren, on that as well. I'd say Morse is in line in that 70s range, and it varies widely from class to class, as you would expect. Some classes have much higher, almost on a daily basis, and then some are unfortunately much lower on a daily basis. And then going back to Anita's question, as far as trends, I would say in terms of the actual participation in distance learning, I'm not really seeing a trend. And unless you could characterize or kind of clump other parts of they're prioritizing other parts of their life for better or for worse as a trend. But they are variable. I've been happy that we've been able to connect with the families or the kids of a very high percentage. I wish our percentage of participation was greater. And I just echo Katie that we'll get some kids in and do a really good job, and then we'll lose them a little bit, and then we'll bring them back, and there's some of that going on. So I think that kind of paints a little bit more of a picture of what we're seeing.
I know, Lorna, because you referred to us at BRCTC, that one trend that we have is our more academic classes that can teach from a book. Early childhood, CNA are having fantastic, they can still teach a lot of their curriculum. One trend I see is a lot of our kids are working full time, which we were giving them credit for as long as they're checking in, but they may not be completing the assignments that they're given to them. But a lot of our kids have gone to working full time at this point.
Thank you.
Yeah. What measure, Katie, I guess, or what are you measuring when you say engagement? I mean, is it you're documenting participation of the student in one class a week, or how are you what are you using for a measure?
For the one, the category, not just of the contact with families, but of engagement, we would have had to see them more than just a one-off. So we're seeing them on a fairly regular basis. It could be sometimes like Eric just spoke about, which is you might see them for 1 or 2 classes, and then you don't see them for a week because whatever's happening with your family, and then you see them again. But you're at least having some kind of relationship and communication and some sort of semblance of work and participation from them.
Okay.
Steve, to add to that, some students we're seeing participate in the online, face-to-face classes, and then not doing the work. And then some students we're seeing the opposite from. We'll have students not engage in these online classes, but the work's coming through on Google Classroom. So I think we would, if we had one of those or the other, we'd say they participate. But echoing Katie, if they just pop in once and then not, then I wouldn't say that they engage. So it's kind of a judgment call. Again, we're not doing daily attendance like we would when we're in school.
Right. Okay.
Any other questions?
Is Justin on by any chance?
Yep, I'm right here.
Yeah. Could you just give us just a sense of how it's going with the special ed population? I mean, are you finding that with our district resources, you're able to effectively contact that population?
I mean, I think it's pretty similar to what's Katie and the principals are seeing, but I will say that our case managers are making, just like our classroom teachers, regular efforts to contact families, but I wouldn't say that it's substantially different. There's a few kids that we've had a little bit of difficult time getting in touch with, but we keep trying, and our staff are making themselves available, and I think they're doing a pretty good job.
Are you finding that the kind of supports that families need, that the parents need with special education population are different than the supports?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a few parents who, it's obviously a challenge to try and teach a student with a disability at home, but we're doing the best we can when folks reach out to give them as much support as possible, whether that be PT, OT, speech. We're doing some of those things virtually for families that have reached out and are interested in that service. So it is definitely a challenge, but I think, again, when people reach out, we're doing the best we can to support them.
Okay.
Hope that answers your question. Yeah.
No. Yep. Okay. Thanks, Katie. Any other questions for Katie at this point? I guess the quandary is, and I think, as you said, you got a request from the paper, just using that as an example, and you're having to divert some of your time to put into, creating, paper on everything that's going on. And I recognize it's going to take some time for the paper to catch up with reality. I mean, these things are unfolding pretty quickly, and we'll have our numbers, we'll have our reports, but that we have to be patient. That's my view, anyways.
Yeah, and then the last thing I'll just say about the distance learning is, again, I continue to just be so impressed with our staff. Everything from, I saw Brandon's cat on a video with a tie this morning doing the morning announcements, Jen saying baby beluga on her announcements, to our teachers, one of which, I spoke to, who spent 15 hours on Friday writing her lessons for this week. People are working incredibly hard just to get the 70 to 80%. And I just want to say thank you on behalf of, Patrick and myself for all the work everybody is doing, because, given that things change daily, it really is exceptional. And so I think folks are continuing to do an excellent job of finding the balance between the joy and the connection and trying to continue as best they can with the academics. And that's exactly what we could hope for.
Okay. Thanks, Katie.
Katie, just one question. I don't know if this is going to come later or not on an agenda item, but will we hear more about the plans for professional development, scheduling and planning after when the students are let out?
Yes. I don't know, Patrick, how much you have shared yet, but the principals and myself and Justin and Dean have all put together the list so far of everything we need to be working on and making happen in June. We haven't actually put our heads around what that plan will fully look like yet, but so as soon as we have something that's more consolidated and public ready, I'd be happy to share it. But we do have, I think, almost too much in the works, considering I'm not sure what it will actually look like to be physically present in the buildings yet. So we're sort of waiting, especially to find out what happens with hopeful announcements from Janet Mills on what we're even allowed to be considering, because that will shape a lot of what the professional development will need to look like.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions on this for Katie or Patrick? Oh, okay. Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Patrick. 8.4 Finance Committee, and Lou, I've asked if Lorna would give a report on this. I hope that's okay.
Yep,
Lorna?
sounds great.
Yes, hi, I had to unmute, I'm sorry. So yeah, we had a remote finance committee meeting on April 22nd, and that was Deb Clark, Patrick Manuel, Ben Shabak, who's our community member, Stephen August, and myself. We really just opened with general questions and answers on the budget. I had asked for some discussion and questions relative to any carryover from the 2019-2020 fiscal year to the next one, and when it could be recognized. The idea of, could we carry over anything additional or recognize anything to help offset the budget in these troubling times. Deb did confirm that only after our fiscal year is closed and the audit performed would the actual carryover be known. There will, of course, be some cost centers that would be down to the shutdown. For example, facilities might be able to complete some projects in this fiscal year, allowing for some flexibility for next year. But there was discussion also on the public perception that we would have a large amount of surplus resulting from the school closure. And of course, that's not a safe perception. We still have salaries and benefits and contractual obligations to follow through with. And also we don't have the same revenues coming in from food service, even though we are providing it. We discussed possible relief to schools under the the CARES Act, Coronavirus Act. And with the unknowns on the effects of revenues, we opted to do our second reading of the budget on, I think this is right, June 8th, to afford time for those funds to be distributed. or known. Steve suggested that our budget have some flexibility to support tutoring, staff, testing material, or transportation to provide some summer or early fall support to those students who might need it. He requested that before the regular school board meeting, that Deb ID those cost centers that may be down, and we do have those in our board packets. And then last, Patrick had advised that he was contacted by the parents, by a few parents suggesting the advisory committee, which we just learned about, and also that a survey would be going out shortly to get more data on what those needs might be. That's what I had, Steve. Did I forget anything?
No, I thought that's great. That's great. Thanks. Any questions of Lorna? I do apologize. I guess notice of the Finance Committee meeting went to Finance Committee members generally, not to the general board. I know a couple board members said that. I think Jenny, you raised it. You would have liked to have signed. The meeting went by before with you looking for the invitation. And going forward, we'll be sure that all board members receive an invite to the meeting. I apologize for that. Any questions of Lorna?
Yeah,
Just on the
there should be
timeline.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Patrick. Go ahead.
On the timeline is just, we were thinking of June 8th, as Lorna said, for second reading and signing warrants, and then June 30th for the district budget meeting.
Right.
Hopefully we can bring people together by then, but this is still unknown. And then July 14th would be the actual referendum.
Thank you. Yeah.
Go ahead, Jen. Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's fine. Sorry. Lorna, did you mention that Deb had issued us something about the cost centers that were reduced that was in our packet? I don't have anything.
Well, I'm sorry. It's the year-to-date budget report, and it shows amount remaining. I'm sorry, it wasn't. I didn't mean to entitle it as something. It's not exclusively that, but we have the that's what I was referring to. Sorry.
And that's the report that we usually get, right? With each board packet.
Yes.
Okay.
I think when Deb gives her report next, hopefully she can identify some of those items, the bus service, for example, and others, which we were going to look into.
Okay, I'm here. Do you want me to jump in?
Well, unless are there any further questions of Lorna? If not, nope, go ahead, Deb. Thanks.
Okay, so the report that was in your packet is for the end of March, and basically that's showing 23 million that we've spent out of our $33 million budget, and so that's pretty much in line with where we've been. Now, as far as any savings due to this, is we will have a little bit of savings in our substitute line. But that line was pretty close when we were working our way through the year anyway. So, but we will have a little bit of savings there. We'll have some savings in field trips, obviously. Officials will have some savings in. And then basically out of district transportation for our special ed students that are transported to those schools. So I do see that we will probably have, obviously, it's probably a little bit more in supplies and equipment than what we would if everybody was back in school. But between all those, basically, then we would have to, I'm thinking that it may be wise to, Tim and I are going to work once April is over on where we think the shortage may be in food service. So maybe we would transfer some of those savings over into the food service account so that we don't fall back into a negative balance where we've worked hard to get out of that. On the revenue side, basically, all our revenue is coming in with the exception of food service. There's a little bit in student activity that may not be coming in. But as far as our assessments to the towns are coming in, and our subsidy and our tuition as well, because we've sent those invoices out. So, so I think, if we do have some, at the end of the year for the audit, which I just received a message from Hank, and he's going to start the first part of the audit process virtually. So if we do have a higher than usual balance, which we should, we can always apply that to the 2021-22 budget, or we can see where we're at closer to June as far as what we may receive in additional federal funds or some of these other things. So I did reach out to and heard back from Joanne Allen today asking about the intentions to reduce the 2021 subsidy for the budget. And at this point in time, she said it's too early to tell. No decisions will be made until the Revenue Forecasting Committee meets again. So that's where we're at. I think, we're still spending, like Lorna said, on salaries and contract obligations. So there obviously will be a little bit more than we planned, but at this point in time, it's hard to tell, an exact figure.
So timing is key here. Obviously, did your contact at the state give you any sense of when the forecasting committee would meet and when they might make revisions to?
She didn't, but I was watching the news before this meeting, and it showed, and I'm assuming that this is the same committee. It showed a meeting in August. So I'm thinking that we probably won't know for, a little while.
Okay.
Steve?
Yep. Go ahead, Jen.
So I didn't get to the finance committee, but I have a lot of questions about the budget and a lot of, I sent an email out to everybody. There are a lot of areas that I would like to be considered to look for reductions in.
Yep.
And I'm not sure where that happens most appropriately.
Well, we have under new business 12.1, there's the public forum on the proposed budget.
Okay.
So I think your comments would be raised then, I think.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, if you have comments on Deb's report, we should raise them here, but.
I have a question about something she said, not necessarily on the report.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Deb, so is there when you heard back from the DOE, from the state DOE, was that in reference to the additional, not sure what's going on right now. The screen's going crazy. I'll just keep talking though. Was that in response to revenue impact, loss of revenue impact to the additional funding that came to us in the last supplemental, the 500,000, we'll say, that kind of general ballpark number?
I don't believe so. I believe it's basically what I was asking her about is the actual subsidy that they have printed out on the 279s for us to use in this proposed 2021 budget. So, that's what I was asking her for, any reduction there.
So the additional supplemental numbers aren't in the 279 yet?
No, that 279 was issued back in February, so.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Would it be updated? Wouldn't the additional monies flow into the 279?
It should, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
If you're talking additional money for the general fund, is that what you're talking about?
I was talking about the supplemental budget, the additional money through the supplemental budget that was passed, the additional funding.
I would say that, yes, it definitely would flow through the 279.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
if I receive an update, I certainly will let you know.
Okay. Thank you.
The revenue loss, Tim's on there somewhere. You're serving about or you're putting out about half as many meals as you were previously. I mean, what's your approximate revenue hit because of this? Do you know?
Tim, I don't know.
Steve, I'm here.
Yep.
It will be difficult for me to tell what the difference is on a revenue from a revenue standpoint until I file my April claim. A full month of operating under the summer food program, which is what we're currently doing, will give me a better sense of what my revenue and also give me a better sense of what my expenses are going to be. I could do a calculation because I know what those reimbursement rates are going to be. And so I could look at the number of breakfasts we've served multiplied by the reimbursement rate and the same for lunch and see what that income looks like. But I'll really have a cleaner sense once I'm able to file that April claim.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. What was
Tim,
the
I just wanted to say, I wanted to say thank you. I heard from the Full Plate, Full Potential, the Justin Alphon organization that had grant money available, and I've heard that RSU1 has reached out and utilizing that grant money available, and as they can continue to reapply for it, I just want to say thank you to looking at all possible additional funding resources to help with this part of the budget.
Yeah, and I'm glad to do it. Where there have been opportunities to try and get additional funds, I've tried to go after them. Not always successful.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Deb, as soon as you can, as you work through this, if you can quantify some of those presumptive savings, we'll call them savings, that would be great. So,
Okay.
Any other questions of Deb? No.
I can quantify some of those figures if you want. Probably I'm going to say I'm quantifying subs. I'm looking at probably 50,000, 30,000 for field trips, officials probably 10, and 70 in special ed transportation. So, like 150,000 more than what the normal would be.
Okay, that's helpful, I think. Okay, thank you. Thanks. Okay, item 10.0, old business. 10.1, Jen, do you want to walk us through the board goals? I don't know. You think they're still we still have them, I guess. We should still address them. So.
Right. I was actually kind of wondering how they may change or what we might have as a goal going forward.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
When Katie and Patrick kind of solidify the professional development schedule and objectives, that might be a reason for us to adjust a goal or to put something out there. I think that the building committee is doing fabulous and continuing to monitor, and with Patrick and keeping our construction project going. So that's absolutely remarkable, and that does, definitely under our goals. I don't really know if some of them are, the rest of them are as practical in this new era that we're in. So I think that we'll just kind of, I do think that the district's response to intervention is going to be something that will be critical in the years to come, to help with learning deficits and social emotional issues from this era. So I will look to see how we can continue to address that, but happy to work with anyone if they want to, if we're looking for a new goal or way to revise a goal for meet our new world.
Yeah, we should think about that. That's a good point. Any questions of Jen? No? Okay. Still under old business, we have several second readings. So these will be action items. And since we need to record our votes by doing a roll call, I'm going to suggest that we take all these, unless there's any particular policy that someone would like to pull out for specific for particular consideration. I'm going to suggest we take all the policies as and bundle them and just take one vote. Does anyone have a objection to that?
I had two policies that if I could just really quickly make some suggestions on or highlight some questions that I had. It's 10.3 and 10.7. The second reading of the private school student with the extracurricular sports and the cell phone. I don't know if there's anyone else.
The cell phone?
10.7, which was the cell phone policy.
I had questions about that policy too, just some of the logistics of wording and numbering in it.
Okay.
Cleaning some.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't, if no one has concerns with the other policies, why don't I'll read the other policies and we'll take a vote on those and then come back and discuss the two that Lorna and Jenny have identified. Is that okay?
I'm sorry, Steve, but I also had a question about the social media policy, just because it looked like there was some old wording left in it.
Which one is?
Social,
Oh, the
BEB.
10.9.
10.9.
Yeah, I don't.
Yep.
Yeah, looks like there's some other old wording in the second paragraph. Maybe
Okay.
it's supposed to be there. I don't know. Just a question.
So let's go back to the top then. So this under second reading, and I'm going to ask for a vote on these. We have policy IHBAC, which is the child find policy. Policy BCA, board member code of ethics. Policy KE, public concern / complaints. Policy JLCB, immunization requirements for students entering RSU1 schools. Policy BEA, which is board member use of electronic mail. So do I have a motion to adopt those policies?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second.
Move the approval of those that you listed.
Okay, so we have a motion by Bill, second by Lou, all in favor. Anita?
Aye.
Lorna?
Aye.
Jenny?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Megan?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Tanner?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Okay, so let's go back to 10.3. We have policy JJIAA, which is private student access to co-curricular, interscholastic, and extracurricular activities. Lorna, you had a question?
So I was just under letter A, section 2, letter A, I'm sorry, where it talks about getting written approval. I would propose, just to make it more clear and kind of level the playing field, that we have a form that students and parents actually have to complete, a verification form. And I found a sample on Brunswick's website, but I wonder if it's a standard Maine School Board Association policy. And it really is just a documentation checklist of items required for verification of eligibility. And what it seems to do is it makes it more consistent on what we're looking for. And it also provides something for principals and other designees to provide. And it also makes sure that we're making decisions on the same information. So I'm just wondering if that could be something to consider, unless it's already there and I didn't know it.
Patrick?
And then, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you had a comment, Jen?
No, not in this one.
No.
And then on the, letter G says RSU1 shall assess an additional share to the private school for the cost for the activity. Is that like transportation or something? Does anyone know?
Well, why don't we, Patrick, as far as the first issue raised in terms of writing, it was my understanding that there was a form that was used, but is it a district, or is it a building by building form, or is it?
State.
Yeah, we're not, I mean, we don't have this is for, this isn't for like students that are trying out for a sport in RSU1, if they're an RSU1 student. So we have those forms that Brandon would use and that Eric would use and Jason would use for middle school and high school activities for sports, for example. And you fill out an emergency form, you fill out all that paperwork. This is for students that are wanting to participate that are coming from a private school. And so they would have to get permission from the building administrator before participating. And so we don't have a form right now. We've talked about creating one, but it wouldn't be the same. It probably wouldn't be the same exact form as what we use in the district for students that live in the district and come to RSU1 schools. So I'm not sure what you were referring to with the form, but we can talk more.
The last after H, when it talks a lot about, I'm just wondering, and maybe we just end up tabling it, I don't know, depends on everyone's feedback. But the language that talks about a principal sort of deciding whether a student can try out or participate, I'm just wondering, do we really know what our numbers are for the team or for a roster until a student tries out? And I'm just throwing out the idea or the suggestion that we at least if the students fill out the request and the form, if they could at least try out, so that we do know for a fact what our numbers would be for the team. So those were my comments.
Any comments for anybody? Patrick, in terms of liability, how does that work? I mean, if an RSU student is injured while participating in a co-curricular or an extracurricular activity, I assume that the district bears some responsibility. If you have a student without a relationship to the RSU who's injured, and I'm thinking specifically before he or she even starts participating, but through a tryout, for example, how, do we get a waiver of liability, or how does?
No, I mean, if they're filling out the form and they're communicating with the principal or the athletic director, and we give them permission to come out for a sport, then it would be treated the same as a student that attends an RSU1 school.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
and Lorna, I would just address your last question. There is the policy committee's talked about it a couple different times, and we've gotten input from different schools and different organizations on this, because it can be when we understand that. The thought process is that you usually have a sign up of how many student athletes are going to go out for tryouts, and that tends to be, it's not perfect, but it tends to be fairly accurate, give or take a few students. And so if we know we have 25 students trying out for 15 slots, I think the thought process of people that support this policy is that, having a student come when that you can't, you're going to have to cut some students that live in the district. And if you know that ahead of time, just trying to be, I guess you trying to be helpful, I guess, or not to lead someone on as far as, the tryout piece. That was the thought process.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other end of that, the other discussion of that is, should outside, so a student that doesn't come to RSU1 schools, should they be able to try out for a sport and have it based on ability and the coach? That's kind of where this policy has gone back and forth on.
I mean, and I can see that, and I understand the choices people make when they go to a private school. I also can see that some of those kids have siblings that are in district. some of those kids have friendships through swimming and other participation, and some of those kids and their talent can be a benefit to participation. So it's difficult. So as we continue to look at it, I just were some things that rose to the surface that, at least for continuity, I was hopeful we could tighten it up and also really give some consideration to what our true intent is on the sports participation and the goals we're looking for in that participation.
So we can certainly take it back to policy again. I don't know if Megan, Jen, Anita, if you want to comment on that, anything, because I know we've talked about this policy, specifically quite a bit, but.
Any comments from the Anita or Megan? You're on the committee, the policy committee. I feel that we have been through this. I think in terms of the discussion, Lorna, you sort of touched on it, that the tryout, the opportunity to try out is really an opportunity to persuade, the coach and to introduce this element of skill and ability into the equation. For me, it's a question of it's not a question of excluding those individuals from participating in our sports program. It's a question of affording every opportunity for RSU1 students to participate in the sports program of their school. You're right. Parents make choices. I took my kids out of public school and sent them to private schools, and there were things that were not. There were advantages to that move, and there were disadvantages. And with my two daughters, I weighed those advantages and disadvantages, and we made a choice, and we stood with the consequences of that decision. It meant making new friendships. It meant that I paid taxes to a school district that I did not send my kids to. It meant a lot of things that I think have parallels here. But those are the choices, and I just think that these are not, this is sports and extracurricular activities are often sold that, it's not winning or losing. It's the other skills that you learn or the other experiences and skills that you carry away from participating in those activities. And so I would really feel that we've denied our RSU1 student population an opportunity to get those experiences if we were to weaken or to alter this policy. There are some wording issues here. I mean, if it's the pleasure of the board to take this back to pull this back and resubmit it to the committee to take another look at, that's the pleasure of the board.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to recommend that in fact occur. I think the policy committee has done an excellent job with this policy. And we all recognize that it's a very difficult one, and we've got to protect the opportunity of our students within our district, and this does that. But it sounds like there are some questions still to be answered, and I'd like to see this go back to the committee, and I guess make a motion to table it and send it back to the committee.
And I think it sounds like, I'm glad we're fleshing it out, but it sounds like what I'm hearing is it's more, we're looking for a fair policy, not necessarily a competitive policy. Like the tryout process isn't necessarily competitive for skills and academic standing that you have to prove and all that. It's more assuring participation for our RSU1 students. And then if we have extra room, then people from out of district can participate. So those would be good things to try to ask ourselves in this policy is this a fair policy or is this a competitive sport? Recognizing the competitive nature of sports. And if we happen to be able to fill a team of RSU1 students based on skills, and we have the opportunity to include others, then that's one thing. But if this is just a fair policy, then that's another that I think we should probably make sure that we are all on board with.
Well, we have a motion to table. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, second by Lorna. We have a motion by Bill, second by Lorna. Any discussion? I don't sit on the policy committee, so I know what I'm told. I haven't participated in the discussions, the back and forth discussions on this, but are there any comments?
So this is
Yep, Lou?
just for clarification. So this is just to clarify some of the language.
Well, I
Again,
think
I think
Lorna,
it's pretty straightforward what this is, and if people have questions, that's fine. But I'm just trying to understand why it's going back. Is it just to clarify
Some semantics.
Yeah, I guess that's what it is. But yeah, I'd like to hear from Megan.
Yeah. Let's make sure we do it right and that it's expressed in the appropriate way so that we're covered and our students are covered and we have a policy that's workable.
I think the language here tracks other district language. I mean, I don't see much ambiguity in the language. I think Lorna raised an issue. I dropped it on the floor now. Raised an issue on the written aspect, and maybe there should be a reference in there to a form if that kind of formalizes it a little bit more. Any other discussion?
Could we have, could the policy committee have, if we does come back to the policy committee, could we have some, something in writing to some suggestions to how it might be changed, if that would be possible? From Lorna, if that could be, could you jot down some notes and some areas that you thought you would?
Sure.
Okay.
I just remind folks, in order to have this policy, we do have an obligation here to have this policy effective before the beginning of the fall sports program. I mean, that I think is only fair. So we're asking the policy committee to take this back and to make recommendations to the board at our next meeting, at our May meeting, assuming we don't meet through the summer, which might not be the case actually, but let's have a policy in place for the fall.
I think our policy committee meeting after the next board meeting though? I think it is.
It is, but we could move it up to the prior Thursday if that works for people. So I can have Vita send something out so that we can be ready for that. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion by Bill, second by second by Lorna, that we table JJIAA. We'll do a roll call. Anita?
Aye.
Lorna?
Aye.
Jenny?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Megan?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Tanner? Okay. And I'll vote at the table. Okay, second reading. I'm losing my eyesight here. JICJ, student use
There
of
you
cell
go.
phones. Student use of cell phones, I think,
Yep.
Lauren had a comment on that too.
Just a couple of quick questions. I appreciate the work that went into this, into the new wording. A couple of things where it talks about, I think in the first, under item A, the teachers, I think, have autonomy for making decisions on allowing cell phone policies in the classroom. The only thing I'm just throwing out while respecting that autonomy is, would we consider just a prohibition of cell phones in the classroom with a request for exceptions being submitted by teachers for those, so we understand what those exceptions might be? That was one thought. Under A, school activities, to me seems a little broad on interpretation on what is school activities. That's under item letter A. And then under D, when it talks about recording in the locker rooms and bathrooms, maybe this is a question for Mr. Varney. But is this, I just want to make sure, is this something that we can enforce? And is there any concern of consequences for the school by not enforcing it? I know for a fact TikTok happens in the bathrooms. So that's just a question I'm putting out there as far as our ability to enforce it.
I'm sorry, Lorna, I don't actually have the wording of that policy in front of me. Is it the wording that prohibits filming in bathrooms and so on and so forth?
Yes, and I think, and again, I'm not suggesting that all of the recording is in any kind of malicious way. I'm just wondering if we have that explicit language and that strict language, which I fully support, are we able to enforce it? And if we're not, and this could be for Patrick too, what is our consequences as a school or district for not enforcing?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be fully truthful if I said that it's monitoring students' cell phone use is a very difficult thing to catch, for lack of a better word, and in a private space like that, it would be difficult. But like most policies, the effort would be made to enforce the policy if that were the policy.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, Lorna, we want restrictions and we need them. And, like anything else, Eric and Devin and Nate and the teachers are going to do the best they can to, enforce this policy, but we can't know everything that happens, but when it's brought to our attention, and that's why we have it in here. I mean, again, we want our policies to be doable and manageable, but we also need to have guidelines. So I think that's what we were trying to get at.
And then I was talking to a constituent who, it was after the deadline for noon, who had seen that the cell phone policy was on the agenda, and it did raise a question for me too. Bath Middle School seems to have had a lot of success in pretty much prohibiting them. I'm wondering if we have ever thought about that, knowing that we're preparing our kids for career readiness and cell phones are not allowed in the workplace. And just wondering, again, this is more just kind of rhetorical, I guess, but where Bath Middle School has had success, whether we had thought about at least having them turned off in the hallway and in the classrooms, and just being a little more specific.
I would be just a little bit, I would hesitate to have a blanket policy where we would want to have them banned completely during the school day, only because some students use them as assistive technology. So there are some times when it may be appropriate for them to use their cell phones in the classroom or in school. Maybe limiting them for educational use, communication, assistive technology, those kinds of things. But I would hesitate to just blanket ban them across the board.
I can say, Lorna, I certainly, I have thought of a more restrictive, not policy, but would be procedure at the high school. And it's something that staff members and we discuss from time to time, but we have no specific plans, outside of the policy that you're looking into right now. But it was something that was kind of not officially on the table, but something that was talked about, especially where the middle school has had some success, and we're going to discuss it with them and see if there's any parallels. I mean, high school is different than middle school, but to look into it and think about it.
Okay, are there any quick wording changes that would satisfy your concerns, or are we going to vote to? We need a motion. We're either going to hold this policy or approve.
I just had a quick question, Steve, about, this is just a cleaning up, but there's the numbering and the lettering doesn't seem to work. So if you approve this, it would just be approved with a adjustment to the lettering and the numbering sequencing kind of thing. That's all.
It goes from A to C, so it would go to A to B, for example.
Yep, and the numbering too is they deleted some numbers and haven't renumbered. It's just nothing big. But the motion should include that if we pass it.
Right. So again, what's the pleasure of the board?
Motion to approve.
And it would be a motion to approve with those letter and number sequencing.
With the adjustments that are necessary. Okay.
I would think if this is going to get approved, that at very least saying during school activities, would we not want to at least to be clear and classroom instruction? Activities is, I know what it's meant. It's meant to capture everything that happens at school, but I'm just trying to be devil's advocate and allow less wiggle room on that interpretation of that word.
So if a student is involved in a formal activity, right? This isn't walking to a co-curricular event or a co-curricular activity or walking to participate in a sporting event. It's while they're actually participating. Is that what the intent is here?
That's the way I interpret it.
And is that not narrow enough, Lorna, or?
I guess. I guess
Lorna, the part that's crossed off, Lorna, before that, we could keep that, same language during classes and school activities. Is that what you're?
I'm getting at? Why would we not at least say, understanding that teachers can waive that if they want, I guess, but why would we not at least say during classes?
Yeah, we could put during classes and school activities.
Yeah.
Add that in.
Okay. Would you amend?
As amended, yes, indeed.
Okay, can we take a roll call on this? Does that address a concern, Lorna? Or
It addresses one concern if it's going to move forward for action. Yeah.
your other concern pertain to the language on prohibiting, whether it was enforceable? Is that?
Yes, and I guess I'm still struggling with still struggling with some of the allowances and trying to understand how a phone could take the place of some educational. I guess maybe I just don't understand enough examples of why turning your phone on in class would be beneficial to your instruction. That's all. So, but it's certainly up for more discussion or even approval.
Lorna, I don't know if it's helpful. I can give you examples of how my kids use them daily in our classes. We document portfolios, and it's much easier, and especially on the job site, to take out your phone, take a picture of what you've done, email it to your teacher. And really, honestly, it's a lot easier in our environment for a kid to turn in a document if they forgot to really quickly with their phone, email their teacher via their phone, than to get on a computer and start transferring documents back and forth. And we also really try to teach workplace readiness, which we feel that learning responsible use of a phone is important. We don't use it. We certainly have consequences when students aren't using it correctly, but we do value their use in some circumstances in the classroom.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so we have a motion to approve with changes, with amendments. I will read the roll again. Anita?
Aye.
Lorna?
Nay.
Jenny? Lou?
Aye.
Megan?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Steve? Aye. Tanner, are you there? Nope.
Aye.
Oh, he is there. Okay, so we have 6 or 7 aye, one nay. So the motion, the policy is approved or adopted. Excuse me. And then the third policy, BEB, board member use of social media. Jen, did you had a question on this one?
Yeah, it looks like usually when we get a template and we work through a policy, there's the way the template's read. The second paragraph, there's a hard expectations in a hard bracket. Can someone help me? Was that intended there, or is that something left over?
Oh, yeah.
I think it needs to be omitted, but.
Yep.
Okay, so that is
I would say
struck.
pass with making it.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns on this policy? We'll strike that hard bracket. Do I have a motion to adopt the policy?
I'll make a motion to adopt the policy.
We have a motion by
Second.
Lorna, second by Bill. We'll do the roll. Anita?
Aye.
Lorna?
Aye.
Jenny?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Megan?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Steve? Aye. Tanner?
Aye.
Okay. So that policy is adopted. So the policy JJIAA goes back to the committee, and we'll get a recommendation at our next board meeting. Okay, 11.0 personnel item. Patrick, you have a retirement?
Yeah, just one retirement. I'd just like to thank Elise Copeland, who is our gifted and talented ed tech in the district and works mostly at Fisher Mitchell, but she's been in the district for 30 years and would just like to thank her for her service. And she's also done a great deal with Odyssey of the Mind in the district. So thank you to Elise.
Yep, thank Elise. Thank you, Elise. 12.0 new business. 12.1 is a public forum to discuss the proposed budget. So Patrick, if you have a presentation or any comments you want to make, otherwise I know Jen has questions and concerns.
No, I don't. We did the presentation last time, so I don't have anything specific presentation wise, but I do want to just mention some of the things that I think Jen has been thinking a little bit about, and Deb and I haven't had a chance to really catch up since I had a couple calls this afternoon. But I think there's still a possibility of subsidy being reduced at some point. I think we should be realistic to that, just because with state sales tax revenue and state income tax revenue, with the unemployment that's going on right now, the federal government is promising aid through Title I, but right now we don't know if that money does come into Title I, can it be used for general purpose aid? And we don't have the answer to that yet. So we can use the money, any carryover money that we have this year, if there happens to be a state shortfall as far as subsidy goes. So we have a summary article that allows us to do that, that we pass every year. So I just want to put that out there that, I think that's possible. I mean, the conversation that Deb had email from the Department of Education today was that they, are very hopeful, and they have not been contacted to adjust state subsidy, but we still got some time to go here. So anyway, I just thought I would put that out there.
Thanks, Patrick. Jen, did everyone receive? Jen sent an email about 5:30. I don't know if everyone received that, but
I saw it.
Jen, you want to address some of your concerns?
Sure. I appreciate all our work to be done, and I want the most for all of our students. But in the light of this economic problems that we're having right now with unemployment and the cost of living going up and everything, all these things, I would have at least consider the ability to come back with a reduction in budget from what the original budget was before the pandemic. So the areas that I would, I'm concerned about our study. I'm also concerned about the $100,000 in additional state subsidy, because that is based on revenue projections, and those projections have gone down, and so we could expect a reduction of the money coming in. So where is there any areas we could cut our budget, and I would only hope those areas that impact any staff income or any staff health insurance. So the areas that I was asking, could we look at? One is, to think about what is really needed for academic success, and then what we want for our students and our communities in addition to that. So I would like, to look at things like field trip cost, and I'd like to look at, were there additional areas like that we were considering additional IT purchases, like for the yearbook. If there's any savings and needs that we have to do for assessment, if the state has changed any of those. I'm glad to hear that we might have some savings in substitute teacher costs. Another area, I'm glad to hear that we can use some of our carryover money. I would like to see used before we come up with a final budget to send to the municipalities. But I also like to know if there's a conversation going on around debt relief for the bond principal payment we have. I'm a loan administrator, and I work all day long working with different options for our workers so they can continue to they can delay some of their big, huge financial impacts that their loans are making on them. I've done a little research. I haven't been able to find anything. I wish I could, but the question around that big principal payment. I mean, we asked who we're bonding with, is there any option to delay that principal payment until the next year or some other time until we know how much we are going to get audited financials and how we're going to stay things to apply to that the next year. I'd like us to also look at the level of stipends, that we continue to pay, there weren't sports weren't in effort this year because they were contractual. But again, is that another area we could look at having a portion of those schedule be costs that would be able to allow us to go back to the towns and say, we cut every possible we can. We know everybody is struggling right now. I'm very concerned because all the program relief and debt up there's still not down to the towns, and there's non-property tax, there's mortgage relief, and there's student loan relief. But there isn't, I can't find it. I've asked everyone I could know in government and by business. I haven't heard an option for helping property tax relief. So I am very concerned if we remain at this budget that we're really, townspeople are going to struggle to pay an increase in a mill rate. And I was also had a couple of questions about additional teachers that were being added through the Title I program. I was able to get back to me and explain some of those, but I still couldn't quite understand how adding a teacher and a half was going to be not increase the budget at some point. I didn't know if I didn't quite understand how that was going. So I just wanted to know how we would go back and take another look at this budget if the rest of the board is even interested in that. If it's just me, then I don't want to make more work than would be.
Thanks, Jen. First, just a housekeeping thing. Are people, Jen was cutting in and out a little bit there. Are other people experiencing that, or is it me?
No, she was cutting in and out.
It was her. Maybe we should take off the video, Dean.
Yeah.
I don't know if you recommend that.
Maybe everyone can take their videos off. That might help our connectivity.
That should help quite a lot.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm clicking on it. It doesn't seem to be going off. Let me go down here.
Yeah, we know you're just trying to want to be center stage.
Did I go away?
You did.
Yeah. Okay.
So
let's see if that helps. Go ahead, Jen. You still had other
I don't know
comments?
what really was cut out, but I listed a bunch of areas.
Yeah, I
debt
think,
relief.
yeah, I think we could at least I could hear you. I knew what you were talking about. It's just that on the edges things were a little bit
Okay.
a little bit, it's kind of like an echo chamber there. But I think at least I certainly heard all your points, I think. Patrick, do you want to address? I mean, this is the public forum on the budget. The budget's not done. I mean, if we ask that Patrick go back and take a look at these, and Patrick and Deb go back and take a look at these cost centers and see whether there are additional places to find some savings, then we can certainly do that.
I just think that as we're asking our townspeople to pay more property tax, I think that people are looking at needs and wants right now, and will for the long term. This economic downturn is going to last a while, and I think we should do respect out of them.
Yeah, no, I think it. If nothing else, it's a good exercise. It helps us, fine tune the budget. So, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of our financial advisor on our bond issue, but
Radigan.
Yeah, Dick Radigan.
Yeah, Dick. Have we been in touch with Dick on anything that's going on in the banking community in terms of restructuring our payments? As he hasn't approached us, because I'm sure you would have raised it with us, but Can we at least pose the question to him?
Yeah, I mean, Deb and I can talk to, try to get in touch with him tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I guess I would say, if, the finance committee, we certainly have time if the board agrees with moving our budget process back. And I guess it would be the finance committee that we would, want to hold another remote meeting and kind of either get direction this evening or from the finance committee about, like kind of a number, because, Deb and I can look at a budget, but not knowing what you want to see for increases. And if it's there's not a whole lot there in non-labor. There's some probably that we can reduce it by, but, it was a 3% increase this year on non-labor. And we do have those new positions in there, but, so we could call a finance committee meeting if the board would like to do that.
Can I just comment on a few things that Jen said?
Sure.
And so first of all, I really appreciate all your input. I can tell you've really looked at things and you've been working hard, Jen, at looking at the numbers. I would agree that if there's any other areas that we can look at, we should. I'd like to see us, and we can talk about it more in finance committee, but I'd like to see us look at the impact on the number of students, so that if we decide to cut one thing, does that impact just 10 kids, or does it, in an elective, or does it impact the potential for a whole indoor track team, if you know what I'm saying. And then the other piece as we go forward is to understand that while we don't want any extra burden, I'd really love to hear from the public too on, as it stands now, we're looking at $20 increase for Bath, $51 for Arousik, $24 for Pittsburgh, and $41 for Woolwich. Understanding those revenues could be more fluid than what we're thinking about. The impact we're looking at right now are those numbers that we've projected in local share. And then the last thing I would say is, while I definitely would like to go back to the drawing board, kicking our debt service down the road is something I would want to make sure we all understand, because eventually we're just paying more interest. So we're really adding the burden in the future.
Yeah, and the bill becomes due.
Right.
Well, that depends that, the interest that you're going to pay is the question. Is it deferred interest? Is it forgiven interest? Is there any? I asked Congressman Pingree's office because she's doing a lot with this right now, and I asked specifically to her staff, is there anything out there that we aren't utilizing that because we're under this debt burden right now, and that would that help us? And I'm waiting for a response from her office.
No, I think it's a question we should at least pose to Dick and see if there's anything in the banking community that he's caught wind of that might address some of that concern. I think I think the budget as initially presented is certainly responsible. I understand the concern as Jen raises it. We're also, in my mind anyways, we also have that obligation. We've got to maintain the integrity of our academic and our academic programs and the supports that go with that.
So do you want to, Patrick, let us know if there's, if you come across any options, and things are changing literally daily. So, if something comes up that, we see that if revenue's down, there's going to be some rescue on the banking end of things to refinance things or finance things differently. Then, certainly if there's a reason to, we bring the finance committee back together and we look at different options. But I think I agree that the budget as it stands is responsible, and it doesn't mean we can't revisit it, but there's still so many things changing. I don't know what huge dent we could put in it at this point. So
I would be concerned about, I don't know, cutting back or scaling back too far as well, because we don't know what level of remediation our kids are going to need next year or so to kind of catch up on lost ground. You know, if we end up doing some summer programming for more kids than we would normally do, or, you know, need to add more support in the classroom to help some kids catch up who are struggling, you know, all those things may cost money. And, you know, if we make promises to the community that, oh, we're gonna scale back and then we can't keep them, I wouldn't want to do that. And I also agree with Lorna, before we move any debt forward, I'd really want to weigh the risks and benefits of that.
Yeah, Anita, I wasn't thinking of anything that would be in academic instructional. I was thinking of trying to find cuts in the budget that would not be about academically supporting our kids. So there would be those additional things, may I call them, you know, not that they're not important, but preserving all opportunity that we have, and also looking at, we may even have more need than we, by cutting the budget a little bit in those areas that aren't direct academic support, would be giving us even more ability to have, you know, if we find that there is a lot more in that area that we have to do. And I was only commenting about the ability to get debt relief if it was forgivable interest. So not necessarily deferred interest, but forgivable interest. So we weren't seeing an increase in our cost.
Okay. So I think I heard Lou kind of suggest that we not ask the finance committee to reconvene at a time specific, but let's see if there are any inquiries. I guess I would ask Deb and Patrick to take a look at some of the items that Jen, you've listed here, and maybe others, to see if there's any real meat there, you know, as opposed to a small amount of money, but money that might significantly change the outcome of the budget, and to inquire on the question of debt and anything that the CARES legislation might have said regarding to debt, and then make a decision on the finance committee. Is that kind of what I heard?
Yeah, that's basically it. I mean, I you know, obviously we're open. There's a lot that's fluid right now, and we have to be patient. We have to see what's out there. So yes, if as you're working on things, I mean, you know, obviously you have enough to do. But if we have some inquiries, and, you know, as Jen has done a great job looking into different things, and we don't know what'll develop on the federal level. But if there are some things that looks like, hey, we may need to look at this, and by all means, we'll have a meeting for the finance committee to look at options. I mean, we should always be looking at options, but I think we need to first, let's see what you know, what's there, and then we can meet if necessary.
Okay. Any other comments on the proposed budget? So Patrick gave the new schedule, so we're doing the second reading on June 8th, which is about 6 weeks out. So we have a little bit of time to let the situation unravel. And I do think, to Jen's comment, I mean, I do think I'm certainly I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I think all members of the board are very mindful of impact on the community in terms of tax burden, and I think I think we've tried to present, you know, going back to as long as I've been on the board, anyways, we've tried to present a budget that's fair that's responsible, and one that protects and advances our academic programs in the schools. Okay, if there are no other comments, we'll let that situation develop a little bit further. 12.2, we have the approval of probationary teachers, and this is an action item. Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, you received a list of the probationary teachers that I'm recommending, and the principals are to move to the next level of employment. I did include a link of our supervision evaluation system in your backup. I mean, we did I think a workshop session on that about a year ago, and our steering committee has met recently and made some adjustments because we're out of session. But, just because of the COVID-19, the probationary period is still 3 years as on an extension of that. And I also just wanted to point out to you going forward, anybody that's hired after the 2021 school year or this next hiring cycle that we go through it will go back to a 2-year probationary period. But these are the people that our administrators have observed and evaluated according to the to our handbook that we have and that we're recommending to you this evening for approval.
Okay, so do I have a motion to approve
The entire group.
the probationary teachers? Yes, the entire list.
The whole list as one group. So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Bill, second by Lou. Discussion?
Well, every year I say this, but I'd like it in the record that I feel odd that we're approving, where the board is required to vote on this when we don't have any understanding of how many times a teacher has been observed by their building principal. I mean, like I couldn't open the link, Patrick, that you sent. It gives me a 404 Google error, so I couldn't get it opened. But it just always seems to me a little disingenuous that we're saying, fine, we're approving that, especially continuing contracts, when we know the guidelines that building administrators have to do, but we still don't know the impact of other teachers that have had working with these teachers to say yes. I mean, I'm kind of going blind here, but I have a concern about it, and I hope that the level of peer involvement is there, and I hope that their actual observations and discussions are going on with building principals, and that building principals are getting feedback from other communities and the people that these people are serving to make sure that they are eligible to progress to the continuing contract level.
But Jen, this is Lou. I'm confused. I mean, if they're presenting this list because all that has occurred, or they wouldn't be presenting the list.
That's your assumption.
Well, everything that's brought to us, I'm not asking for every little detail, and we have to take it at the word that things are being done, or we're not micromanaging what's being done. So
I didn't say we were. I say I have concerns about this specific issue, Lou, and the specifics of continuing contracts. It's been a concern of mine all along, and it just continues to be so.
Okay. Thanks for the comments, Jen. Any other comments? Okay, if not, I'm going to call a roll. This is an action item. Anita?
Aye.
I lost my list. I lost my agenda here. God. Lorna?
Aye.
Jenny?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Megan?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Steve? Aye. Tanner?
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously, thanks. 12.3, reallocation of personnel.
I beg your pardon, Steve. Do we have to vote if we go past 8 o'clock?
Yeah, we do. I've got my watch here. I have 7:55, so I'm
Okay.
well, Okay, let's take.
We got 5 minutes.
Yeah, we got 5 minutes. Well, let's see if we can get this next
See if
item.
we get-
Or
yeah.
is there going to be a lot of discussion on this item? Do you have questions on this item? Okay, let's take the motion to extend the meeting. Jen's right. If I guess our practice, if the meeting extends beyond 8 o'clock, we have to do it with the explicit approval of the board. So I'd like someone to make a motion that we extend our meeting beyond 8 o'clock.
I'll make a motion that we extend the meeting beyond 8.
I'll second it.
We have a motion by Lorna, second by Bill. Anita?
Aye.
Lorna?
Aye.
Jenny?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Megan?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Steve is aye. Tanner?
Aye.
Okay. Thanks for the reminder, Jen. Now to item 12.3, reallocation of personnel. Patrick?
Yeah, we have 2 items here that we wanted to run by the board. And I'll let Katie start with reallocation of personnel in Title I.
Sure. So with and I know that Patrick forwarded the rationale paragraph I sent to all of you. And so I'll be brief here because I know that you've read that. But with our lunch numbers, our free and reduced lunch numbers continuing to go down, our free and our Title I and II funding continues to be reduced because, as you all know, it's based on those numbers. Just to give you an example, this past year, it was a total of $651,000. It's now going to be down to $613,000. So we'll have lost about $40,000. When I spoke to the people at the state, they actually told me it would be more if we were held to our exact free and reduced lunch numbers, but there is a hold harmless policy where you can never lose in any one year more than 5 to 10%. So you can at least plan for these reductions in funding. And so that's sort of one piece of the information. The other piece of the information is our current staffing. We actually couldn't afford this year based on what we are currently receiving. We actually ended up not being able to hire an ed tech last year because no one was interested in the job. We just couldn't fill it. And so we used that entire salary as carryover to fund our current staffing levels. So it's sort of a double hit in that we obviously don't have that carryover anymore of that one ed tech, and we also are losing that amount of money, and have been told we will continue to lose likely 5 to 10% if our numbers continue to be the same level or reduced. And so this kind of brought about a need to think of, a need to restaff and our sort of the way we think about our programming. We currently have at least a literacy, if not also a math Title I person in our buildings. And then we also have 4 ed techs dispersed, and mostly we're talking about Fisher Mitchell and Dyke Newell. Phippsburg also receives Title I funding, but given its size, this wouldn't impact them. And so what the principals and I determined is, because we need to change the way our program is structured, with less money, we need to make sure that we can continue to fund however we structure it in the future. So the 4 ed techs we have in the program, we can promise them continued employment through special ed, as we're adding 4 new ed tech positions in the current budget. But we won't be using ed techs in our Title I program anymore. What we're going to be doing is instead replacing the almost $200,000 in ed techs with just a teacher and a half, but restructuring so teachers or Title I interventionists at Dyke, Newell, and Fisher teach both math and literacy, which they currently do not, and are attached to a grade level. Because in this way, we're able to reduce how many teachers these interventionists are having to plan around, as well as not spending their time overseeing and helping plan lessons for ed techs, which then thus increases how many students they're able to see. And so we actually feel by reducing the amount we're spending through this new model of having only a teacher and a half added rather than 4 people, that we'll be able to meet the same needs, because we're totally reconfiguring how students are being seen by attaching teachers to grade levels. I know this is pretty complicated if you don't know how things are structured now in terms of the, who's attached to which students. So feel free to ask questions.
So are the 4 special ed techs in the budget now that where these Title I people are going, are those all mandated 1-to-1 requirements? Ed techs that would be 1-to-1 for students?
The 4 ed techs, and I see Justin clicking back on, the 4 ed techs that are in the budget are in various different positions. Justin, you can answer if they're all 1-to-1, but they're in different buildings and in different special ed jobs. Are they all 1-to-1?
And one thing I'll just mention is, Jen, you asked me this question today, is the 4 ed techs, the ed techs are in the budget right now because we had, remember in the finance committee meetings, we had BHPs, behavioral support personnel, that in the budget this year, but we weren't able to fill those positions because we had a company that was trying to hire those. And so we ended up hiring long-term subs, basically ed techs this year. So those positions it's not an additional cost to the district. And then Justin can talk about, because we have those 3 to 4 positions that we weren't able to fill this year, where in the district they're all over the place. But Justin, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, sure. Of the 4 positions, 1 is most certainly going to be a 1-to-1 support position. The other 3 will be within our programs. So our behavioral support programs, or our resource room programs.
So Patrick, you said, this is what I'm thinking, I'm just trying to understand, is it, we had these BHP positions that couldn't get filled. So were those positions that were budgeted and didn't get filled, or were they filled with other staff?
No, they were filled with long-term subs, basically. I mean, we were looking for people with a specific skill set, and we were using a company to help us fill those positions. And when we weren't able to fill, there was still a need, but when we weren't able to fill them, we hired long-term subs, from the beginning or the fall of this year through March.
And so is the budget, so by utilizing a teacher and a half, which I guess this question is like, how easy is it to find a teacher? It's not a teacher that wants to work only half time, but by doing that, are we being able to see as many students as 4 ed techs were able to serve?
Yes, because currently we have some ed techs where their schedules aren't full. And we also have, it has more to do with how we're going to structure folks and attach them to grades. So I'll give you an example. Right now, a literacy person might have to coordinate, let's say at Dyke Newell with, if we say there's 4 teachers per grade, just for this example, if you're seeing students on your caseload, you're basically having to coordinate the schedules with 16 teachers, depending on who's on your caseload, just for literacy. And so that gets pretty complicated. So there can sometimes be holes in your schedule that you wouldn't ordinarily plan for. But you can only pull students from certain classes in order to offer them interventions according to the grant that supplement their education, that don't supplant it. And so by switching the model, these teachers will be teaching both literacy and math to just one grade level, which means they'll only be coordinating with 4 teachers, 4 different literacy and math classes. And so even though it seems, interesting to think about how can you replace 1.5 people with 4, it really is all about the structure of how we're teaching and how the grade levels have been divided in the past than it is the actual personnel.
So these teachers will be assigned, there'll be one teacher, one literacy and math teacher assigned to each grade level?
It will be one person per grade level, and they will each teach literacy and math at Dyke Newell. So one will be a kindergarten person, one would be a first grade teacher, one would be a second grade teacher. Each interventionist would do both the literacy and math. So they might see their, 20 to 40 students once per day just in literacy, or they might see them once for literacy and once for math.
So how does that compare to Woolwich? Is there one teacher assigned to each grade level for those same grade levels at Woolwich?
We have to do a totally different structure. We have to keep it content-based in our K-5 schools because it would be too difficult. We don't have enough staffing to do one teacher per grade level, nor enough classrooms because they only have either 1 or 2 classes at Phippsburg and Woolwich to be able to compare. So it's really not, it would be sort of an apples to oranges.
Okay, I don't quite understand that last part, but maybe let me stew on it for a little while longer. Okay.
I'm happy to re-explain it. What part didn't you understand?
Well, I don't want to take up the whole board time. Let me think about it a little more, Katie.
Well, I think the question is, are students being served in Woolwich? And I think the response is
no. That's not the question.
No. Okay.
No, but I'll stew on it a little more. I can process it. Katie, one of the things that I guess because maybe my position when I was doing Title I math at Woolwich for years was dependent on the Title I funding. I just don't know.
Clarify, Jen, Woolwich isn't a Title I school anymore because it doesn't have enough free and reduced.
Okay. I know. And that's what my comment was going on, Katie, was that I was like, it's so sad that that program is going away. And I don't know if that's really reflected on the economic needs of the families that are in Woolwich. And I don't know where that's going to go to. Is there any instinct of if we're having an unemployment rate as high as we are now, even with unemployment wages and the extra $600 additional to those benefits, are we going to see more families? Could we get more families on this program if we had some outreach to people?
I think probably not the amount that we would need, but in the budget currently that we're going to be voting on in July, Woolwich is the only place receiving another interventionist for the program you're talking about. So they're actually increasing their staffing more so than any of the other schools. So because we do feel that we need to make sure that we have a fair staffing across all of our 4 schools, elementary schools, regardless of where the funding is coming from.
So you're saying because Woolwich is getting the additional staff member, that's why that's based on the additional staff member that this Title I program is adding to it? Or the teacher, not the ed tech version? I mean, is that part of the reason that you're going to a teacher for those 2 other schools is because Woolwich is doing it?
They're not at all related. It's all about caseload numbers. So the reason why Woolwich in the local budget, we've proposed adding an interventionist is because we want to make sure that the teachers within that program have an equal number of students they're seeing on their caseloads to our other elementary schools. And currently their numbers are slightly higher. And so we wanted to add an interventionist with local funding because Title I doesn't support Woolwich to make sure that there is equal services for students across all of our 4 elementaries.
Okay. And do you see any chance of trying to increase Title I participation in Woolwich? Free and reduced hot lunch participation? Is there anything that we can do to help increase that so we could have some Title I monies flowing back in?
Tim would be able to speak best on what the percentage at Woolwich is. All I know is that they don't qualify, and I'm not sure what his number of how many applications they get back is.
Okay, any other questions for Tim? Do you want to address that, or any other questions for Katie on this issue?
All I can say is I think without having those numbers in front of me, I think Woolwich right now is somewhere between 32 and 36% free and reduced. Certainly there are things that we could do now because of the unique situation that potentially could impact next year with regard to those percentages. But I think that doesn't solve the long-term situation, and that is, district-wide and specifically at Woolwich, trying to get those applications filled out and returned, by the majority of families and students who attend that school.
Okay, that's.
So it's not really that we don't know that there's no need, but we do know that the applications don't come back. So
exactly.
But that's the problem. That's the problem you've been facing throughout the district, Tim. I mean,
with some schools more than others.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Any other questions for Katie or Patrick or Tim on this? Okay.
I think the final thing I'd like to say is I'm really happy that we have the 4 special ed tech positions in the budget, because the 4 ed techs we have in our Title I program are really exceptional. And this is no reflection of the great work they've done for our students in the program. And so it is great that even though we have to change this because of funding, we're able to keep our strong staff members. So I'm really thankful for that.
Okay, thanks, Katie. Thanks. Okay, item 12.4.
Hey, Steve.
Yes.
What we need to do is, I have another part of that reallocation of personnel.
I'm sorry.
It's around music, district-wide music.
Yep. I apologize.
No, it's fine. And this one's much shorter, at least I hope it is that when we had a retirement this year of a music teacher in the district, the principals got together, the administrative team, and looked at the number of classes that we're serving, number of students, offerings, and we are recommending to reduce the music teaching position by 0.8. So that person is retiring, and we're looking again to reduce it by a 0.8 FTE, and all students in the district will have the same amount of music time, meaning music and choral and band next year. We're just trying to be more efficient. So what we were looking from the board tonight was as kind of just a protocol procedure, is to have a motion to reduce the 4 ed techs in Title I, and also to reduce music by 0.8.
So that would be an action.
Yeah, it's more of a formality, but it's, we've talked with the association about this, and it's just something that so that when we enter this next budget cycle, that it's more of a record keeping type of thing, but it's a motion so that we can start to look at revising our music program as far as who's going to be where, and also as far as Katie's the Title I piece, that moving forward with hiring the teachers. And again, nobody's out of a position, nobody's out of a job in the Title I piece, nor the music piece, but we are essentially riffing 4 ed tech positions, not people, but positions, and a 0.8 position in music.
Okay. so we can discuss
Steve?
this. Yep, go ahead.
I'm sorry, but my one thing, everybody says you're not riffing anybody because you're moving those 4 ed techs to the positions that are in the budget right now. But those positions are additional positions. And so if anything happened and we decided we didn't want to have those additional positions funded in our budget, just, something happens to all of our state funding and we are looking at not filling those, what would happen to those 4 ed techs? Because those are new positions.
They're not new because they were in the
additional.
Budget. They were in the budget. No, they're not additional. They're in the budget this current budget, and we filled them with long-term subs because we're not able to find BHPs, but they're still in the budget, and there's a need for them because they're programming a special ed that's required. So I don't see, Justin can weigh in, but I don't see any of those positions going away. And we also have, fluctuation in our special ed department anyway, but those positions are currently in this budget.
Yeah, I was going to add the same thing, that those 4 positions aren't things we could consider cutting, as they're required, most of them by law, to meet student needs in their IEPs.
Yeah, and again, we're just shifting our model from relying on, outsourcing for BHP support to having our own in-house ed techs.
So to clarify, those aren't the ed techs that are listed as additional to the 2021 budget.
If you're looking at that last sheet, Jen, and it says additions, it says 1 additional ed tech, and I think it probably uses a language in lieu of 3 BHPs that were in there from last year.
Right.
So that's what we're trying to communicate and convey, is that they're in that, there was a set amount in the budget that's in the budget for those BHPs, and we're basically transitioning that, taking that money and putting it towards our own ed techs that we will hire.
So why are they listed as additions if they're not additions?
It's just a different way of writing the same thing, correct?
But if they're already in there, why would they be additions to the budget? Why would they be listed there if they were already in the budget?
I mean, that's just the way Deb put it in there as additions to 2021 budget, but it says underneath that, it says in lieu of contracted BHPs, which is in the budget now. I mean, we can send you a spreadsheet tomorrow that will show, that if you like.
I think what was helpful for me, Jen, on that is that I understand what your point is, but what if we were to look closely at the cost centers, we would see one cost center go down and one go up. So right. I think it was just clarification that we're putting it in there as an addition to kind of acknowledge, if people are looking closely at each separate cost center, that kind of explains, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's why
it's 4 new additional bodies, but we're removing the money from contracted fees in special ed.
So that looks like it's going down, but right. It's getting moved to special ed.
The funding that was available for those 4 ed techs was budgeted in contracted fees because we were paying it to an outside agency. So we are removing that and putting it in salary and benefits.
Okay. Okay, so what we need is a motion on, Patrick, do you want to help us with framing the motion for the?
I mean, basically it's a motion to, reduce or reduction in force of 4 ed techs in Title I and a 0.8 FTE in district-wide music.
Okay, does anyone want to make that motion?
Yeah, I can make it. I'm not sure. You said it's to reduce 4 ed tech positions and
in Title I.
I'm sorry?
In Title I.
In Title I. And did you say add or?
No, a reduction of 0.8 FTE.
And a reduction of 0.8 FTE in music.
Music.
Okay, so we have a motion by Lou. Do I have a second?
Second.
second by Bill. Discussion, further discussion?
I think this just kind of, me personally, just shows my newbiness, but this is another, I think I mentioned even the last school board meeting that if anything ever settles down with the COVID-19, I would really like a special ed workshop in the future, just so I feel like I have a better understanding. And it's not at all that I question the necessity, clearly the necessity is there, but I just think all of us could probably benefit from some understanding on these terms and what our current picture is for ed techs and what cost centers they come out of and all that. So we can't hammer it out here. And I'm not, again, questioning the necessity of it. It's just, it's overwhelming, frankly.
Yeah. I think we did it a couple years ago, maybe longer.
Yeah. It was like 4 years ago.
But we can certainly put that on the agenda.
Yep.
Any further discussion on this? Okay, if not, read the roll. Anita?
Aye.
Lorna?
Aye.
Jenny?
Aye.
Boo?
Aye.
Megan?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Steve? Aye. Tanner?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, item 12.4, final student day discussion. Patrick?
Yeah, I just wanted to start the discussion tonight and, whether the board is in favor of kind of voting tonight or whether you want more time to think about this. But we've been in discussion with several districts and Maine School Management and the Department of Education about this topic. Some districts are ending remote learning. And again, what I mean by that is just what it says is teachers working with students on May 29th is probably the earliest I've heard. And some are going until June 12th. Our administrative team has talked about this and, we're proposing a June 5th, stop to remote learning. And, we realize that remote learning can be challenging for students and staff and families. At the same time, we know it's providing structure, normalcy, and new learning for students. So we're trying to find that balance. Our staff would continue to work through their contracted days, which is June 18th, and focus on such areas as managing their classroom space, professional development, and planning around what next year would look like for students. We have talked to the association about this plan, and they're in support of it. I'm just going to mention a few items. We do have a Google Doc that has all kinds of items, but I'm just going to highlight a few, once for staff at the end of the year. And it's really providing feedback to students on their remote learning, the send-offs and celebrations to help bring closure, to the school year for students. That probably will have to be done remotely, but kindergarten registration, screening, child development services, file reviews, the transition meetings of what class students will be in next year and how to group students, returning materials, laptops, families picking up belongings. We have to figure that out. The academic planning for next year, the summer school, remediation, next fall, anything from social distancing to remote learning if we still need to apply some of that. We recently read a really interesting article from Denmark about the things that they're doing in their schools, kind of like one of the public comments that you received this evening. Other things, cross-grade level meetings, curriculum conversations, revisit master schedules, and reviewing professional goals with staff and our summative evaluations. At the high school level, the graduation planning, the student certification at BRCTC. So I'll stop there, but we're just trying to find that fine line between doing our best with remote learning, but at the same time providing our staff with enough time in this kind of unprecedented situation to bring closure to the year, but also to start to prepare for, next year, and some things we know and some things we don't know.
Patrick, if you've already settled on this, if you've settled on this date and everybody's okay with it, I would be in favor of voting to approve that tonight, because, the more we know with deadlines sooner and when things are transitioning or changing, the better, and then people can plan accordingly. But I would be in favor of voting for that.
Yeah, and again, there's still some unknowns. Like, for example, if we end on June 5th, on June 8th, we don't know yet whether we can bring staff into the building, or if it's just, a handful of staff that we can bring in at a time. Well, we have to do the majority of this remotely, but those are details we'll just have to work through.
Well, yeah, I mean, and obviously we can always call another board meeting if, there's something that we absolutely have to vote on because something has changed. But I think voting on this, so staff knows, parents know, families can prepare, I think it just makes sense for us to take your recommendation and vote to approve.
If that's a motion, I'd second it.
Okay, take it as a motion.
I'll second it.
Well, you got to wait for me. Wait a minute. Okay, so we have a motion by Lou, a second by Jenny. Discussion. Patrick, what are some of the our close neighbors doing? And I'm thinking like of BR, the other districts that participate with the tech center, and are we in sync with our closest neighbors?
Yeah, I don't think everybody's made decisions yet. I think people are looking around, that around the same time frame that we are. I know West Bath, we've talked with them and they're looking around the same date. I don't know that 75 has made a decision yet, but I think people are kind of trying to, again, juggle the importance of remote learning, but also, again, that closure and pre-planning for next year.
Well, I agree. We got into remote learning in a very awkward, haphazard sort of way. It'd be great if we could end the year in a more orderly fashion with staff and administration, and the board having a good opportunity to kind of wrap the year up to the extent that that's possible in an ordered sort of way. I don't disagree. What was the June? I don't have a calendar in front of me. June 5th is a Friday, obviously, right? So,
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to suggest even, well, first of all, I'd really like to see it on the survey, but I'm not sure on your timing if that's going to work out. But I was even going to suggest Memorial Day, the Friday before Memorial Day, only because we don't have the data, but I think people are hanging on to this remote learning, hanging on. But I'm wondering if after a long weekend, the last week of school tends to be a lot of watching movies and doing activities and having field day. I'm just wondering, are we gaining a lot by June 5th? And if not, would we entertain that Friday before Memorial Day? Because I agree a closure is a good idea. A date, as Lou was saying.
Yeah, I think we were just trying to balance, the work that we have our staff do, and, ending in May, it seemed to the administrative team to maybe provide, too much time at the end of the year for staff. And we realize remote learning is not a substitute for classroom instruction. At the same time, there is new learning, going on, especially, at the secondary level, and trying to get through, curriculum. And so this was kind of that balancing point.
Okay.
We thought.
Yep.
Okay, we can. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? We can always, if other information comes out, we need to revisit this, we can. I do like the idea of giving as much notice to families as possible. And I think that kind of suggests that if we're comfortable taking action tonight, we should.
Mhm.
So if there's no further discussion, I'll call the roll again. Anita,
Aye.
Lorna,
Aye.
Jen,
Sorry. Aye.
all right, Lou,
Aye.
Megan,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Steve is an aye, Tanner.
Aye.
Okay, thanks. Tanner, your high school career is going to potentially end on June 5th, I guess. Oh, you're just a junior. You're not.
My junior year will end on June.
But your junior year. I'm sorry, I had you graduating. Maybe you want to graduate.
Don't graduate him yet.
No, don't graduate him yet. Okay, item 12.5, ad hoc committee. This ties back to the two public comments that we had, which were paraphrased toward the beginning of the meeting. The district was headed in this direction, and it is an opportunity to kind of shape this group that might provide a postmortem, some reflection on what the remote learning experience has been in the RSU. And again, I would also like it to look prospectively at what opportunities and what knowledge we've gained going forward. And there are things like the lack of, the importance of connectivity in the community to support our educational our education needs and the students' needs. And I think our experience with remote learning has really highlighted how important that is, and the governor has an initiative to improve our high-speed connections throughout the state, and they've never been more important than they are now. What I'd like to suggest an ad hoc committee to do it. I would like to suggest that I work with Patrick and Katie to try to put together a scope for the committee, looking at membership. And I think membership should be broad, should include teachers, administrators, parents. I don't think it's a bad idea to have students on the committee to give us their experience. And we'll look at a timeline on how this can be done efficiently, effectively, in terms of bringing findings back to the district and back to the board in a timely way, but done in a way that doesn't impede the work that's going on now in the district, which in my mind is the most critical, that we work our way through the rest of the year and we end it on as good a note as possible. Certainly, any board members who want to participate on the ad hoc committee can do so. Can join. I like to suggest that we bring a proposal back to the board at its next meeting, and the board can take action at that point. Does anyone want to add to that, discuss that, argue with me? Go ahead.
The comment, the comment or letter that we got looked like a proposal to me. It almost looks like a gift, really, like as far as getting things going. I mean, we have parents from 3 different communities. We have timelines that they've outlined. I'm not saying
Well, I
it's
think
done.
the board needs to reflect on it and make a judgment. I mean, the letter is very detailed. It graciously tells us when we should do our work, et cetera. And I think the board needs to make that finding independently.
So we need to make that finding based on what administration and staff are capable of doing. So we can't, that's why we need a recommendation from, whoever from the board plus admin and staff to say, well, this is what's, reasonable and doable with, because there's a lot they have to do right now. And I'm in agreement, obviously we do have to prepare and we do have to come up with something, but, and they certainly can use the letter as a guide, knowing what some parents are suggesting, and that's great. But it's really, there's a lot on everybody's plate and things are moving so quickly. But we have to, hear from staff and, admin and staff as to what they're capable of, how they're capable of jumping on top of this. And I'm sure they will, but so I'm all for hearing if you come up with something and we feel we can do it sooner than our next board meeting, I'm for that, but you just keep us posted and let us know.
Yeah. I think both of these proposals or both of these comments from Aaron and the one from Karen, Bethany, and Stephen were well thought through for sure. There are some good thoughts in there, absolutely. But let's as Lou indicated, let's figure out what works for us in terms of other things that we need to accomplish in going forward over the short term. This will be done in the midterm and the long term. It's just a question of allocating time and resources at this point. But we can certainly have a proposal for the board to take a look at and consider within relatively short order. So
Do we, so I respect all that and the time on all the staff and all, but I'm really worried about our community. So can we at least get the survey out? What was the time frame on that again, Patrick? The survey?
We want to do this ad hoc committee. We'll form it, and part of that will be doing a survey. So my plan is to do it ASAP. The guidelines that were, or the timelines in the letter, it may not work perfectly to that, but it's something on our front burner. And so forming a committee and getting a survey out, would be our top priorities to do. So we're much in favor of it and think that having the variety of people on a committee is a positive thing. So, Katie and I will work with Steve, and if we can do things quicker than the next board meeting, then we certainly will do that.
We're looking at maybe not going back till September. That's what people are saying. That's not to be, I just.
Not going back where?
There's talk of another wave and potentially being in this situation in September. So
another wave of school closing, you mean?
Of the cases of the pandemic.
Oh, the pandemic. Yeah. Okay.
So I just, and we often don't get public input, and I'm not saying that we just rubber stamp every public suggestion, but I just want to really make sure. I'm hearing us say it's our priority for this ad hoc committee, and I hear us saying we're going to do a survey, and that's all great, but I don't want to lose our public, because I think there's more to be said that we're not hearing. So that's just my 2 cents on just wanting to appreciate, not wanting to pile on extra work, but also wanting to embrace any kind of public help that we're going to get in the process.
Well, we embrace all public help, but the board in the end is the entity that's responsible, and we want to make sure, and we'll do it in a timely way for sure. I mean, this is, doing a postmortem and looking prospectively at what we might gain from the experience we put in is something we've been talking about from the first or second day that schools have were closed. I don't think that's lost on anyone. What I think we need to be mindful of is the effort that's being put into this by our teachers, by our administrators, and by our parents. By everyone involved. And we want to get this done. We want to get the end of the school year done as well.
Right, and we want to do a survey, and we want to do it right, because we want to make sure we're getting accurate information, that parents have an opportunity to weigh in, that staff has an opportunity to weigh in, and students, so that if, God forbid, we have to continue with remote learning because there's another wave in the fall, we're completely prepared for it. So yeah, I have complete confidence that as quickly as is possible, we will get this moving in May, and have the survey out and have things moving, and whatever you need to bring to the board, you bring to us. And like I said, I'm anytime you need us to meet, we're ready for it, and we'll make sure we're connecting to the community the whole time. So I'm all for it. Do we have to vote on? We don't have to vote on this, or do we have to vote on it?
I think I don't know. I think at this point, I'm still interested in other comments if you have them, for sure. But I think at this point, we're not setting the ad hoc committee up at this point. We're just recommending or suggesting, or we're just pledging to bring a proposal to the board at its next meeting. So I'm not sure we need to vote on that at this point. But
Well, I mean, you are setting up. I mean, you're going to bring a proposal, but you may do it sooner.
Well, we can vote on.
I just want to allay. I mean, it may
let's vote on setting up an ad hoc committee.
I think we should.
Can we, well, are we going to vote on setting up the committee? But I guess, Lorna's speaking to the concern over the timeline. Can we just ask that Patrick return to either the next board meeting or sooner if he feels he's able to,
Sure.
with a timeline, not necessarily this timeline that's been proposed, but something that he feels will work.
I think what I'd like us to bring back to the board and the board to act on it at this meeting is a statement on the scope of the committee, recommendation on membership, and the timeline.
Yes.
Those three things.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I know that when you, I wasn't on the board, but I know that when some students brought forth a solid waste committee, the committee was actually voted on that night, even though all the details weren't hammered out.
Yep. No, well, we can vote on it tonight for sure. Yep. So why don't we put the motion out there, and then we can have discussion if anyone wants to discuss it further. So do I have a motion that we establish an ad hoc committee to look at the district's continuing, what is this formally called? Continuing learning experience?
I'd have to look at their letter. They had a learning continuity committee.
To continue, whether it's remote or under these circumstances.
I'm looking for the formal, what DOE has called this.
Continuous learning plans.
Continuous
learning plans.
Yeah. So the motion could be that we form an ad hoc committee to look at the RSU1's experience with its continuous learning experience.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to create the ad hoc committee for the continued learning.
Okay, I'll second.
We got a second. Okay. Any further discussion? No? Okay, we'll take a vote. Anita?
Aye.
get my list here. Lorna,
Aye.
Jenny,
Aye.
Lou,
Aye.
Megan,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
I vote aye. Tanner?
Aye.
Okay. All right. Thank you. 13.0, next meeting date. You have it set for May 18th, Patrick?
Yeah, and I'll just, I mean, throw something out to the board is, I think Vita picked that as a Monday. It doesn't give us a whole lot of time between this meeting and next meeting as far as budget goes. Whether you want to keep it on the 18th or whether you want to move it back, it would have to be probably that Tuesday though, that it would be on the 26th, like right after Memorial Day. But it's your call either way.
I mean, Patrick, are you more comfortable? I mean, I'm not too worried about necessarily, the budget. I mean, I think if we can do the 18th, that's a week earlier. And if you think you could have ad hoc information, the committee information by that point, it's a little earlier than it normally would be. So I'd be fine keeping it at the 18th. I also think if you run into trouble and you need to move it back, we could always change the date to the 26th.
Yeah, I'm fine.
I would say go with the
I'm fine with
18th
either one.
now.
Yep.
Okay, so the next board meeting, which will be done remotely for sure, is going to be May 18th. Should be as Lou suggested, we might not, or as Patrick suggested, we might not have a lot more budget information at that point, but we can discuss the ad hoc committee and also get an update from Katie on our continuous learning plan. So, okay. So if there's no other business to come before the board, I'd like a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Got a motion from Lou.
Second.
Second from Bill. And here goes the roll again. Anita,
Aye.
Lorna,
Aye, and thank you, community members that have hung in there.
Jenny,
Aye.
Lou,
Aye.
Megan,
Aye.
Bill.
Aye.
I vote aye. And Tanner?
Aye.
Aye. So we've kept the community members, but we've lost Tanner.
I'm still here. I'm still hanging in.
He's still here.
After bedtime.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Good job,
Thank
Tanner.
Don't have any side works here in Pittsburgh.
I don't know. This could be the longest RSU1 meeting that I've participated in, but thanks.
Hey, wait till the next one.
Thanks for everyone for staying in it. Okay. Have a good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank
Night.
you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye. How do I get out of this meeting?